Vandaag hebben we weer zo'n gesprek met iemand uit de wereld van de spirituele zoekers. Of in dit geval niet van een zoeker, maar iemand die het gevonden heeft. Iemand die over de hele wereld reist en lezingen geeft. Niet echt lezingen heten ze, maar satsang. Maar die deelt uit zijn ervaringen, zijn inzicht, zijn wijsheid. Zijn naam is Bob Adamson. Ze noemen hem ook wel Sailor Bob, want zo is hij in het leven begonnen. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
That's an interesting name, Sailor Bob. It means, apart from traveling the realm of what is inside you, also travel the world a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
You did.
that's right.
You're Australian?
I'm Australian, from Melbourne.
Now that is a vast country. Did you travel that too?
Yes, apart from being a sailor, I've been a shearer.
A shearer. Ah, that's for sheep.
Sheep. I've worked in mines,
Hard work.
hard work, I've done all sorts of different things, yes.
Yeah. One of the things that I explain in Dutch is that although you attract seekers, that is not your message. Your message is that we don't have to seek.
That's exactly so, yes.
Why don't we have to seek?
Because what you were seeking, you already are. If you take what the ancient scriptures tell us, that God is omnipotent, omniscient, and
He's there.
omnipotent, well, then what room is there for anybody else apart from that, or anything else?
Well, that means that we are part of God, or we are God.
You are God, yes.
Yeah. Now, for most people in life, that's a hard and tough thing to grasp, because we think that we are not very happy, that we're always looking for material stuff or love or all those things. How did that happen in your life? You didn't come to the point where you say, I'm not a seeker by accident. Well, maybe by accident, but it didn't happen.
Well, my life got to the stage where it became self-destructive. I had a problem with alcohol for years, and all through my life, from the time I was very young, I didn't have any belief whatsoever in any God or higher power, or whatever you like to call it. In other words, I was closed in that department. But I finally got to a 12-step fellowship.
Wait a moment, that is in America very well known, but 12-step program is for people who have alcohol or drug abuse. It's a 12-step
Yes.
self-awareness program, could you call that?
You could call it that, and one of its steps is that you have to believe in a power other than yourself, because the solution is spiritual. But as I say, I had no belief. But then an amazing thing happened. I got to this fellowship and I was able to stop drinking, but I read a book. It was called Sobriety and Beyond by a Catholic priest, and he had in it a little sentence. He said, "We alcoholics are given a second chance at life." And I thought, this is right, because I'd come along to the fellowship in a very hopeless and helpless condition. By this stage I was unemployable and unemployed, and I'd managed to stop drinking, but after a little while the arrogance and ego returned and I went out and drank again. But in picking up this book, I read this in it, that we alcoholics are given a second chance at life, and somehow or other that was
What you needed.
what I needed, because it was like a kick in the stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And underneath was the question, how well do you use that second chance? And I thought, I have been given a second chance. I'm not here because I want to be here. If I could still drink and get away with it, I would be doing that. I could still live the life I was living, because by this time I'd become conditioned to that way of living, and I thought it was the only way to live.
Let me get this straight. So you stopped drinking because you had to, you had no work, no income, no stuff, so you went to the 12-step program and you decided, I want to be sober, but in fact it was forced upon you. It didn't come from the inside.
There was none of my volitional doing, if you like to say that.
Yeah.
If I'd had a choice, I would have been still out there. And that question, how well do you use that second chance? Well, that hit me again, and I thought, well, there's only one, the thought came to me, or the idea, there is only one way to use that second chance, and to find out what it is that's given me that second chance. Is there such a thing as a God,
or an outer power,
or truth, or reality? And that started the search.
How old were you then?
Just on 32.
So you were still a young man, and through some hardship, you decided, I become a seeker, because that's how we can call that, yes?
Well, as I know today, that wasn't my decision either.
Well, it happened to you.
It happened
to many people.
Yeah.
It happens to many. Many of us are seekers, and the sad thing is that we stay seekers all our life. We wander from one book to another guru, to a third church, to a cult, and we wander, and we always seeking. Even now, if I open a newspaper, many times they make a very nice headline, and you think, this is about truth. And I start reading it, and I'm usually disappointed because it's about someone writing a book about it and not doing it.
Yeah.
But so you started going around in the world, or were there avenues you explored in Australia?
Yes, well, naturally, being a Westerner, I looked into the Christian religion first and got a lot of help there, I say, but something pulled me on. In 1962, I think it was, the Maharishi came to Australia.
This is Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Yes, that's before.
The Transcendental Meditation guy.
Yes, at that time it was SRM, before he'd met the Beatles and before he'd become world famous. And what I heard from him sort of rung a bell, like inside, and I tried a technique on my own and practiced it, and I got some results, but after a day or two it went back to normal, and by this time he'd gone. But there was a group in Melbourne, this is if you like to call it a series of coincidences that happened. And I continued the search then, and I looked up in the paper anything that came to town or was happening, and there was a little ad in the paper, anybody interested in yoga, if they would like to come along to such and such an address. And I went along there, and it was the same talk, recorded talk, that I'd heard from the Maharishi. So this time I didn't muck around, I immediately went and was initiated. Now that was the first spiritual experience, and there is a big difference between spiritual experiences and spiritual awakening.
Try to explain that, because you try this technique, which is basically a mantra.
Yeah.
They give you a mantra, and you repeat it in your mind. First you say it loud, and you say it quietly, and then it becomes like a push away. Every thought that comes up, you look at it. Well, that's the theory. You look at it, and you take the mantra, and you let the mantra clean your mind. It's not a machinery, but it's a trick, yes, a meditation approach whereby you clean your mind. And the idea is that by pushing away or overriding normal worries about money and life and stuff like that, that there's a space that comes in that makes you more happy and more, well, not spiritually awakened, but it's like a nice feeling. I've done it myself, and I think it was a great technique. Yeah?
Good technique, yes.
Yeah.
It wasn't the ultimate answer, but from that, as I say, I had an amazing experience that changed my life completely. I say I was initiated there, and I went into this small room and was given a mantra, and I took the usual things you were supposed to take, a piece of fruit and a piece of linen, and on the table there was a photo of his guru, which I did just glanced at and took no more notice, because I was interested in the technique, the mantra, and going to find it all. But a couple of days after that, I'm walking down the street from my home to the station. I was going to catch a train, which was about a 20-minute walk, and this image of this face in the picture seemed to take over my whole inside, and it was like a whole big light. And
wait a moment, this was a picture of the Maharishi?
No, of his guru.
And who was that?
I couldn't even tell you his name.
But some kind of Indian guy, and you saw
Yes,
the
he was,
picture,
yeah.
and he...
Well, I didn't even take any notice of the picture. I could just glance at it, but the image must have impinged on me somehow or other, but consciously, to my knowledge, I didn't take any notice of it. And that was like, I lit up, but at that stage, not knowing much about anything, I thought I was being taken over by something, and I forced this out.
You saw like a bad spirit
Yeah.
or something.
Mm. But it was powerful enough to turn my life around completely. I went to work that day, and up to that stage, I was been full of anxiety, misery, and depression, and very angry and very resentful on the world. And the people at work noticed the change immediately, and they said to me, "Are you in love?" And I said, "Yes." And I was in love, but not with a woman. I was in love with the world at that particular stage. I felt as though I could have walked off the highest building and walked on air. And that really never left me, but after a while the Maharishi's technique, I continued to practice it, and it didn't seem to be doing much further, and the search continued. And
Oh, let's go back. You said at this particular moment in my life, this image filled me with light. Now, we use the term enlightenment sometimes. But this was actually, you felt like a white light or something that
yes,
that changed your inside and outside too?
It certainly did, yes. It was, well, you could only explain it as pure love, I guess. And say, not for anything in particular, but just an uncaused.
But was it a visual experience, or was it a body experience?
It was a body, visual, and I
Everything.
suppose mental, yes. But that was like a carrot before the donkey then. It intensified the search.
But you must
It was
have you were drinking before. Now sometimes if people are very, very drunk, they get into delirium states. They also have visions, and some people say that the reason we drink sometimes is to get to that state of how would you call that? Yeah, where you see other things. Was there a relationship between this moment that you had this fulfillment and what you were searching for, maybe subconsciously before in drinking?
Well, I guess, yes, there would be a relationship. But one way I was seeking it outwardly first, thought I'd find the answer in alcohol or whatever was going there. But this was the first intimation that there was something, if you like to call it, inward. Though today I know there's no inner or outer.
That's, of course, where we finally add that the outside and the inside are the same. But I see so many times that people who are seen by the world as dope addicts or drinking, they also have this sincere wish to find something. Yeah?
Yes.
And that saying, well, you're just a drunk is not a very productive...
Well, when that primary ism comes upon us, that dualism, every other ism arises from that, whether it's Catholicism, Protestantism, Buddhism, alcoholism, drugism, capitalism, communism. Every ism arises from that dualism.
And the dualism making a separation between us and the world.
Dualism is me and the other, yes. Me, when I think that I'm a separate entity.
We go back. Seeking. After you kind of did the practice with the transcendental meditation, what was your next step?
Well, I looked into a lot of things. I caught up, I don't know whether you've ever heard of Joel Goldsmith. He was a Western mystic, died in the early 60s. Had a bit to do with him for a while. And then by 1970, again, see, one thing was leading to another continually. It's amazing how these little things fell into place. Just the same as one thing led to me being here today, which I had no idea that this would happen. And as I say, one thing was leading to another continually, and I went to Joel Goldsmith, and from there I saw a photo in the paper about, this was about early in it was late in 1970, that there was a photo in the paper and that this Indian guru was coming to Melbourne, and this again was well before he was world famous, and that was Muktananda. Now I looked at that photo and there was something that said, I've got to see this guy. And so I went and saw him. I was one of the few to meet him at the plane when he came off the plane. And from 1973 I went to his ashram in India, and I was going to stay there till I became so-called enlightened, but I could only last there a month. You know, the atmosphere, the vibes and that were stronger than I could take at that particular time.
When you say stronger, I mean, you are an Australian, you were a sailor, maybe a bit of a rough guy.
Yeah.
You came in India where there's some very extreme things, poverty, riches, cold and extreme heat. You didn't fit in that?
Well, the vibrations, if you like, in that ashram were so strong that they would stir up, you know, the anger and the resentment and all this stuff that was probably, you would say, was deeply embedded somewhere in there.
That's an interesting observation. So you said that you went to an ashram and you don't blame the ashram for being bad because you got a resentment, but you said it stirred it up. It was in me and it made it come out.
Which is probably part of the, if you like to call it, a purifying process or whatever goes on. I don't know.
You have to see your anger before you know you have it. Huh?
And so I came home and I got married.
Why the change? Why?
Well, this time I was 45, but I'd met my wife 5 years before, and we were going together, and things were up and down a bit. But I thought, now I've been over there, I've been there and done that. There's nothing more to do, so I got married. But by 1975, the marriage wasn't going too well. And we split up. And I was still following Muktananda at this time, so this time I said, I'm going back to the ashram again. And I did. But this time it was totally different. Immediately I got there, I felt the peace and the vibes, and I fitted in. I'd probably, if you like to say, purified enough to be able to fit into it. And I followed that ashram discipline. You know,
wait a second. Would you say that when the first time you went to the ashram it was too strong, you went back and you maybe experienced part of yourself in your marriage that was necessary before you could make the next step?
Well, not only that, but I was still practicing certain things.
Meditations.
Yes, and still, so the seeking had gone on in that from 73 to 75 when I went back. That had gone on. But it had gone on enough, as I say, to probably open me up or clear me enough to go back and take it. Well, from 1975 till March 76, I was carrying out that ashram discipline religiously, you know, very earnest and very sincere about it. And some of the people in the ashram had poked this book, I Am That, at you, but at that time I was what they call loyal to the Guru, and I wouldn't even have a bar of that. I wouldn't look at it. And I was in Bombay one day, and I was in a bookshop, and the fellow behind the desk at the bookshop, he handed me this book, I Am That, and he said, you'll have to read this book. And I thought, well, this is another one of those coincidences. This has been thrust at me several times, and I've rejected it. And I glanced at a couple of pages, and what I saw there rang a bell. This is right. Somehow it fitted.
And this was a book by whom?
It's a book. It's not by Nisargadatta. It was translated and written by Morris Friedman, but it's a book of talks, questions and answers
by
Nisargadatta.
Because this is the first time you mention him. His name is Nisargadatta. So he was an Indian guru.
Yes.
Was he related to Muktananda?
No way at all. No. Totally different.
Totally different.
Muktananda was a Kundalini.
Which is a yoga technique?
Yes, a yoga technique, awakening a Kundalini by Shaktipat. look, touch or word.
Which is an actual, it's a bodily thing?
It's a bodily thing, which
Yes.
yes, I've experienced, yes.
Yes?
That's what I say, you can have many sort of different spiritual experiences. There's only one awakening.
Yeah, there's only one awakening. Now, you read this book about Nisargadatta. I see he was called Nisargadatta Maharaj, but that Maharaj only means he was a big teacher.
Well, that's the name he had, but he was in a room, a little tenement in Bombay. The very room would be about the size of this, back to where the cameras are. And there'd be 100,000 people walk past his door every day and wouldn't know he was there. But yet people found their way to him from all points of the world.
So there you met this guy.
Yeah, I went and saw him, yes, after I'd read the book. I couldn't help but do so.
Okay, but now that's interesting. So the first time you saw this guy, did something special happen, or?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean something special. I see sometimes a girl, I think this is a beautiful girl, or I see something who's very famous, and I say, well, some radiation there. But was it something that?
Well, he made me see clearly that I wasn't what I'd believed myself to be. I wasn't this person that I'd believed myself to be.
Is it like him holding up a mirror to your own self?
Yes, I would say so. It's just showing me that if I like to investigate and have a look at some of my beliefs, at all of my beliefs, my ideas and my concepts, and just look that the false cannot stand up to investigation. And he showed me this clearly, that what I believed about myself was not so.
Wait a moment. You say you saw this guy and he taught you that, but he can tell you, say, well, Bob Sailor Bob, this and this is not wrong. But that's not how it happened. It was like you saw him and that awareness happened to you.
Yes, I walked out of there the first day and I said, well, I'll never get locked into the mind again. I'd seen it clearly, but of course the old habit patterns being so strong, naturally as soon as I'm out the door, the old mental habit patterns came up, but it was never the same again. They'd lost their hold.
So you say that you felt that before that you were locked in your mind, saying in your own idea about yourself? Yeah? That stopped?
Yeah.
You also say, yeah, but I walked out of the door and that feeling kind of became a little bit less vivid. That's what usually happens. People have a strong experience and then goes away a little bit, but how do you get it back to become
It never ever went away as such, but the thoughts, the old habit patterns came up. But underneath, from that time onwards, there was always that sense of well-being, of being well, that nothing was wrong.
That nothing was wrong.
And so the old habits lost their hold. When you know underneath there's nothing is wrong, how can they continue?
Okay. I am not speaking to any body. I'm not speaking to any mind. I'm speaking to that I am, to that presence awareness that expresses through the mind as the thought I am. Just this and nothing else. It is the direct and immediate introduction to the natural state, the actuality, that thou art. That is one of the things that Sailor Bob expresses. Now, this is on a piece of paper that goes around in the world where people are, attracted to what you're teaching. Because that's what you do these days. You go around the world and you teach this. Who am I?
Well, you can't call it a teaching. It's just a pointing out to people that they're not what they've believed themselves to be. Just, they have to see for themselves. I can't teach anybody anything.
But what is the essence of your teaching is that what they have seen as believing to be themselves is just a projection?
Well, the essence of the teaching is that nobody can negate their beingness. the fact of their own being is the only reality they're absolutely certain of. Nobody can negate their beings. Each one knows I am. But that thought I am is not the beings. It's the closest you'll ever get to it with the mind.
But it is the mind that says I am.
It is the mind that says I am, but that beingness is there prior to that thought I am. We don't go around all day saying I am, I am, I am. That knowingness is there continually, but it's expressed through the mind as the thought I am. And as soon as it's expressed through the mind, that is the duality. Because as soon as I am comes up, there must be its opposite, you or the other.
So as soon as you start observing your beingness, your I am thing, you're out of your immediate experience.
Yes.
But what's wrong about it? Most people go around the world and say, well, I'm not dressed, I'm not shaven so well. All these things, they lead to behavior or change in behavior. Oh, what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it if you understand that the reality, that is not the reality. That's just more appearance. It's just all that this, if you like to put it in these terms, all there is pure intelligence energy, the activity of knowing. And that knowing, as soon as it's expressed through the mind, then that is only what appears. It's no longer the reality. So it doesn't matter how it appears, as long as you understand that it's not the reality, it'll still continue to appear. Mm-hmm. Just like we go outside and say, a beautiful blue sky, but you and I know the sky is not blue. I flew from Australia a few weeks ago, so many thousand miles, and I never flew through any blueness. The blueness is always further out. All sky is space. And there's no blueness. This room is space. There's no blueness here. The blueness is an appearance. We know the truth about it. You and I will say, what a beautiful blue sky. We know the truth about it. But we'll still see it as blue. But we're not bound by it like we were if we believed it to be blue.
Now,
so when I know the truth about myself...
Yeah, but so your life story says, I had an image about myself. First I was a drunk and I was this and I was... And now I've given up that belief in that appearance.
Yeah.
That appearance is just part of me, my mind that makes an observation or a judgment on me.
See, that appearance is still nothing other than the reality, but it appears different from the other. You've got a bangle, bracelet and earrings. What's their essence? Made of gold. Their essence is gold. You can't melt down the bangle into bangles. It must melt down into gold. So whatever this appearance is, it still hasn't moved away from omnipotence, omnipresence and omniscience. That one without a second. Whereas, as it's put in the Hindu terms, one without a second, non-dual. And in the highest terms of Buddhism, which I call the Dzogchen teachings, it's just this present awareness. Just this and nothing else.
So going back to where you started with transcendental meditation, which is a technique to push away this mind labeling, because that's what we do. Even if we say I am, you say it's just labeling. Yes, it's just you look at something and you're not there. So by that technique, by pushing it away, you can achieve a certain quietness. Are you saying that if you live totally in this awareness without naming it, framing it, labeling it, we become very quiet and very happy?
Well, then you know that there's nothing to meditate on and no one to meditate. And from that point, you're never out of meditation. It is a continual meditation. And when we're not searching in the mind continually, by knowing that the answer is not in the mind, no matter how hard I search or how long I search in the mind, the answer is not there. Then the mind can still be there, but it's no longer bothering me.
It's no longer?
Bothering.
So this continuous process in my mind where my mind says, oh, you have to do this and that is bad and this table needs that. If I can step away from that judgment, from that projection, but don't I become like an empty shell?
No.
I mean a friendly empty shell.
Like I say, the actuality is this moment. This is the livingness. When I'm bound by yesterday and projecting into tomorrow, I'm not actually living. I'm not fully here with what is right now. Half my time, my energy is in yesterday's memories or anticipating and imagining tomorrow, the anxieties and worries and concerns about that, and I'm missing the opportunities to right with me, right in this moment. But whether I'm in the head or not, right in this moment is that registration. Everything is being registered just as it is. That pure intelligence registers everything. The hearing, you're not only hearing my voice, you're hearing those other sounds outside. We're not only seeing, we're seeing seeing me, but you're seeing what's around you, the different colours in the room and things like that. It's all registered as it is. And that's what is, unaltered, unmodified, uncorrected. The moment the mind comes in, what's it do? It tries to alter, modify it, correct it with some past image or some future imagination, with how we think it should be, not how it is. And that relative point, that from which everything is judged, then takes us out of the seemingly takes us out of the moment, and we're no longer seeing what is, we're seeing what we think it should be, and we're in conflict. We're in conflict.
Now, this is a method or a teaching that says, well, I wouldn't say do away with the mind, but see that it's only a part of us. It's not the thing itself. Now, you spoke about Muktananda. He had a yoga teaching, which was more like feel the body to its fullest, and then you can get rid of the other thing. Now, if we divide people as body and heart or emotions and the mind, do you think that, say, the heart and the body are less important than the mind, or should also be pushed away?
Well, have a look at this body. Right now, it's functioning effortlessly. Right now, my hair is, well, no, I can't say that about my hair, but my hair is growing, my fingernails are growing, cells are being replaced, I'm breathing, heart's expanding and contracting, but I'm not making any effort to do that. It's happening effortlessly. The pure intelligence energy is functioning through this. Even the thinking is happening. But then from that thinking, I believe I'm doing. That self-centre, which is the I thought, believes it is doing something, and so it wants to take over the whole show. But when you realise that I couldn't have a single thought without that presence or awareness, that this body was in the womb, it was growing there, the heart was beating even there when it was in the womb, effortlessly, before the brain was even formed and before the mind was even there.
Yeah, but then so it came in the world and it needed, or it developed an ego, and when we say I, part of that is the ego that sees and says I am, and this is my body, and I'm doing things. Now, if we do away with that ego, we might also do away with the good things of the ego, which gives you drive and, you know, to change the world and feed the poor and all that stuff.
But you see, the ego is a phantom. That, if, I ask you, you're seeing right now, you're hearing right now, and does the eye see, does the eye say I see, or does the ear say I hear? The immediate answer, no. The thought comes up, I see or I hear. But can that thought I see, or can that thought I hear? It can't. That thought I see can't see or hear, so it has got no power. It relies on that awareness or consciousness or whatever, that intelligence, whatever term you like to put on it. It relies on it, just like the computer. It's got all the information in it, but if you haven't got the power on, you can punch those keys as hard as you like. You'll never get any information out of it. Mm-hmm. Well, the same with this I thought. As soon as I believe, see, that I thought is that added to that pure I thought is all the past events and experiences and the conditioning, and that we form an image about ourselves. That's all the ego is. An image I have about myself based on past events and experiences.
Yeah, but so you say you can do away with it. Now, I can understand that.
So it's not a matter of doing away with it, it's a matter of seeing that it has no.
It's a construction. Yeah. It's a mind's construction that we see.
Then,
but the ego,
like the sky, you don't have to do away with it. You understand it. and see it for what it is, and it's no longer binding as it was.
Okay. Yeah, but now what people expect, and what you explain, you went to see this guy, Nisargadatta, and your ego changed, or anyway, you understood that you were not your ego. That was a strong change. Now many people go around the world and they listen to you, and they don't feel that strong change. They're still bound to the ego, but they're kind of working on it. They say, oh yes, what this Bob is saying, I understand. My ego shouldn't be my master. I should see it in reality. But the fear to see that, I think that's between that realization is, can we live without an ego? Gee, it worked so good for me. When I was young and I didn't have any food, I would cry, and the more I cried, my mother would give me food, stuff like that. It worked so well for me. Why should I do away with this illusion?
But you see, it doesn't have to be done away with. The expression comes through the mind. The only instrument we have is the mind. That's the only instrument we have. And when it's understood, it is a wonderfully creative instrument. As I say, all the art, all the beauty, and everything else comes through that mind. This building was an idea in somebody's mind once. Look at it now, it's manifested. So we don't have to do away with it. And when it goes the other way, it becomes self-destructive. When that I thought, looking to become whole, the very idea of an I thought is the initial separation. Because as soon as there is an I, the way the mind functions is thinking continually in the pairs of opposites. If it's not in the past, which is memory, it's in the future, anticipation and imagination, and within that range, it's still functioning in the opposites as good, bad, positive, negative, happy, sad, whatever. So, as soon as that mind is seen for what it is, then it's no longer binding on you. That separation is no longer there, because as soon as that I thought comes up, that idea of separation is immediate insecurity. It's immediate vulnerability. And from ever when that comes on us at about 2 years old, our search starts. We're seeking security. We're seeking happiness. And we're conditioned, it's nobody's fault, it's not our parents' fault or anybody else. We're conditioned to look out there for it. And first of all, if I get a warm, happy family around me, I'll be more secure. Then if I get money or wealth or a better car or a better house or a good relationship, these things will make me more secure. Mm-hmm. And then we go even further than that. These things mightn't be happening to us, so we create a God that if I don't get it in this life,
we'll have it in the next one.
Yes, but you see, that's all is anticipation and imagination, those concepts.
People go and listen to you, and there are other people like you. Can they obtain this understanding because what you say comes into the mind? I hear it and it comes in my mind, and I get the feeling, yeah, well, every time my eye takes over, it's like slapping it on the fingers and saying, hey, wait a moment, this is the I that takes over my being, do away with it. Huh? Will that eventually lead to a continual state of not being driven by the I, by the ego?
That I, as you say, when it's seen for what it is, it is no longer binding, and it doesn't matter whether it's there or whether it's not there. But you realise that the functioning has gone on, is continuing to go on, whether that I thought is there or not. It's happening now, as I say. There's so little part that the mind really plays in it, in the breathing, the livingness, and all the rest of it. So the I thought is there, it's used, it's utilised, it's whatever for, but the knowledge about it, that it's not what I really am. With that knowledge, as I say, like the blue sky, or we know that say a beautiful sunrise, we know the sun doesn't rise in the east and set in the west, we know that the earth goes around the sun. And knowing the truth about it, you're not bound by it anymore, but we'll still say, what a beautiful sun.
Yeah. Now,
so in knowing this, you see, all that bondage to that self-centre falls away. All that, and we realise then, if I understand that there's no self-centre here, then I must understand there's none there. then who's superior to me? Or who is inferior to me? See, that separation, that sense of separation is gone.
Well, then I still hear people like, what is Andrew Cohen, and he goes around the world and he writes books about enlightenment, and he said, well, there's people that are enlightened and there are people that are not, and the book is all about how to get there, assuming that Mr. Cohen made it and some other people made it. I feel a little bit antagonized by that kind of thought, because it would mean that you're different from me or we're different from Andrew Cohen. How is it possible to see the world separated in those who know or are aware and those who are not? If God is, as you say, in all of us, then we're all enlightened.
Exactly.
But we might not see it.
There's no such thing as enlightenment. Enlightenment is a myth. If there is no me, there's no centre here, then there is no separation. If there is no separation, who is there or what is there to become enlightened?
Then we are what we are.
You're already, what you're seeking, you already are. You always have been. It's only that idea that you're separate is our bondage. And when you investigate that and see that that idea, it's only a thought, has got no power, what can it do?
Okay, now...
Then you act as, you've acted all your life. From that point also, you must see that if there's no centre here now, there never was any centre. So all the activities that are taking place have taken place in my life were not any personal volition from me. They happened that way. I didn't set out to be an alcoholic. I didn't set out to be a spiritual seeker, right? But these things happened that way. It took me through all that diversity back to where I am right now. And what's really happened? Nothing except a set of concepts or experiences, or whatever you like to call it, appearances. I've never changed my true nature, and neither has anybody or anything else. It's still that, as I say, the bangle, the bracelet, and the earrings are still gold. They've always been gold, no matter how they appear.
Back to practical things. This happened that you met this Nisargadatta in 76. We're now 96. What happened in in 98 actually. So what happened in the 22 years?
Well, I came back from India in early 77, I think it was. And I wanted to talk about this stuff. And I'd started to. And it's been going on since then.
When you say talking about it, you or find a group of people finds you and they ask you questions, or you tell the same story that you tell me?
Yes.
What kind of questions do people come up with?
Well, it can start from all sorts of different things. I've had people with a lot of drug and alcohol problems.
So that's one angle.
That's
problems.
one angle.
Another angle is people seeking.
People seeking, yeah. It's always comes from the seeking, from the idea of separation. That's where it all comes from. And it's pointed out to them that there is no such thing as separation. There was never any separation. It's only appearance. And by investigating and looking at that, you see for themselves. And it's quite simple to see for yourself that it's only an image that you have that there is such a thing as separation.
Now,
see, we can't separate ourselves from the air.
Yeah.
We can't separate ourselves from the earth.
Now, Bob, we go into the actuality. The Pope has just written an encyclic, some letter to the people, in which he says all this New Age thinking and Eastern philosophy is very bad because it makes people feel equal to God. And we, the Church, would rather have people believe some dogmatic, paternalistic idea. We tell you what is the truth. You have to follow that. And all this New Age thinking, or he actually admits it's an old age thinking, it's an Eastern thinking, is no good. You've traveled both the West and the East. Is that how can the Pope say such things?
Well, if he understands that God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, who's he trying to change? Or what's he trying to change?
Yeah, but like when you traveled in India, did this message is easier for the Hindu people or the Buddhist people?
No, it is no easier because unless they're pulled up, and want to pull up and start looking at themselves. See, we're all conditioned to look out there, and the answer is never out there. It's only a matter of turning around and investigating what I believe myself to be. And that's how my conditioning, that's how society's conditioning is, as I say. We look around first for the family, then the tribe, and then the nation, and nations go to war with nations because of that sense of insecurity, that sense of separation. But stop and investigate. The false cannot stand up to investigation. Once you start looking and seeing that there is that image that we have about ourselves has got no power whatsoever. You see, it's like, use the analogy like putting a piece of iron in the fire. You put a piece of iron in the fire, it'll become red like fire, it'll become hot like fire, and you pick it up, it'll burn you like fire. But take it out of the fire, what can it do? Now what can this I thought, that can't see, that can't be aware, what can it do?
Well, it has led to war,
Yes,
it has
exactly.
led to inequality, to rich and poor people.
Because it's believed in. It's not investigated. But when you investigate it, you see that it's got no power such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but people will say, Bob, we're sitting here, two of us in the West, in Amsterdam, and we've had food this morning, and it's relatively warm, and we are relatively well off in the world. But if I were a very poor guy in India with nothing in my stomach and hunger, and I would listen to you and say, well, that's fine, Master Bob, but I'm hungry. What to do about it? Is your message then, would I tell to myself, oh yeah, but this thought about hunger is just, it's just a thought. Yes, it's not the reality. The reality is I have an empty stomach. How do I go about that? The real problems of the world.
But what really happened? You see, when I understand this, that it's all appearance, what has really happened? Still haven't left my true nature. And if, it goes the way it goes. It's hard to explain. Like, people
Yeah, but the practical, you travel in India, there's very poor people there.
Yes.
How do you go about that? Do you give them money?
If it comes up to give them money, I give them money. If I have the money, if it doesn't, I don't. Whatever comes out, whatever the functioning brings out here, happens that way.
Yeah, well, that's a very practical thing. It's like, if it happens to me, in my life, if I meet poor people, I'll help them. We're not indeed thinking about something that is outside of us. It's like, oh yes, if I would go to India, I would meet people, do I give them money? Or have I given them money in the past when the television said, poor people in Africa? So I agree that is a mind game.
Mm.
But in the real situation, there is differences between us and the people we see every day. Or do you say that is not true? There is no difference.
Oh, I say there is no difference now. It's still all appearance. It's still the one reality. It's never been anything other than that. The appearance is only seemingly so.
But does that give me the right to, even if I have the money in my pocket, to walk past the beggar?
Well, will you walk past a beggar or won't you walk past a beggar? Then sometimes you find yourself you will, other times you'll find you won't. See, what made you decide to interview me? You don't know me from a bar of soap, never seen me before,
It happened.
It happened, exactly.
And I could have said, in fact, I don't think I had a choice. Yes, because it happens, and I welcome things in my life, and for better or worse.
Don't you think that applies to other people too, whether they're poor, rich, or anything else? They might believe they have a choice, but like you and me, we know we have no choice really. It happens.
So then, going to full circle, you say this idea of seeking, of believing that in your life you can change things, that you can seek the spiritual path, or you can seek enlightenment, is an illusion? we should go about our business and do what needs to be done?
Yes, yes, you go about your business and do what needs to be done, but do you have any choice in that, in doing what needs to be done? If you're a seeker, then
it will happen.
It will find one. If you're not, well, you go about your business. You see, because we so-called human beings, we think we're so important. That, you know, a few thousand get wiped out here or there or somewhere else. If it was a plague of mosquitoes or a plague of mice or something, would we take any concern about that? It all comes back to that self-centered image we have about ourselves. That becomes the reference point, and everything is relative to that. But it's not a true reference point, because it's still inside of consciousness or awareness. To have a true reference point to judge it, you'd have to be outside of consciousness, and that's impossible. See, I saw a video not long ago about something that started, and it was a video on when they found the magnifying glass or the telescope, and it went right out to the further reaches of space, by magnifying things 10 times, till the Earth was just a little speck of dust, and the sun, the whole solar system was in that. And they said, well, according to, then they took it back the other way. They got a drop of water in Holland here somewhere, and went inside
Snellius, yes, those days when they made the first.
And inside that there was all sorts of life in that. Now, that little microbe inside that, he couldn't conceive of a life of 70 or 80 years of a human being. It couldn't. Out there, if there was something out there at the end of that, what they said was 24 billion light years away. Now, if there was something out there trying to look back on this would only be a moment to that. Just the same as to us, it's inconceivable, that way, to the insect. So it all comes from that reference point. Wherever that reference point is, it's not a true one. And when I see that this reference point that I'm referring to is only an image, it's only a word based on a word, and the word is never the real. I can say water, water for the rest of my life. I can't quench my thirst with a word. I can say fire, fire. I won't burn my mouth with it. So when I say I, what am I referring to? I have an image about myself, a word. Remember the old saying years ago when we were kids, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me? Someone calls me, insults me, calls me a bad name, what do? I carry that word around with me for weeks and weeks and weeks. It builds into a resentment, and king size builds up until it's got to be acted on. I've let a word take hold and beat the hell out of me. If I'd got a beating out in the street and bruised, I'd have been healed long ago. But that word I allow
so it's allowing appearances to take over our life, and I think that's something we could have learned today from Bob Adamson, that appearances are to be seen as such. The I inside that we think is us is just a representation, a projection. It's not who we are. And that's a wise message. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.